Hi, my name is Cynthia Mason. I'm a Canadian lawyer and trademark agent with the law firm of Mason PC. We are a Canadian law firm that specializes in helping businesses to protect their brands. This video is specifically for the enterprising individuals out there who are thinking about launching a podcast. I wanted to share a little bit of advice about naming your podcast and how to go about it. There's at least two schools of thought with respect to podcast names. There are some people who believe that your podcast name should just be purely descriptive of your field. It will make your podcast easier to be found with people searching by those keywords, versus the other school of thought, which is the school that I'm sitting firmly in the camp of, is that your podcast name should be clever and suggestive, but not descriptive at all of what it is or the subject matter or the focus of your podcast. While certainly keywords are easy to help you get found, they're not going to help you be remembered. And you can't stop other people from using those same words in their podcast names. And so there is a potential for confusing or podcasts with the same names to be out there if you have chosen descriptive words to form the foundation or the basis of your podcast name. So that's my first tip, is pick something clever and suggestive of the subject matter focus of your podcast, something that's going to resonate with your listeners so that they have a better chance to remember your podcast. My next advice is you want to make sure that there isn't somebody else out there using that name in connection with a podcast or an actual paid service that they're offering in connection with, in your field, basically. So, podcasts are a very popular marketing tool for a lot of businesses. And so if you are operating perhaps a coaching or consulting business under one name, there is a good chance that your podcast name is going to at least be related, if not the exact same. And so if you're operating a coaching or consulting business and then somebody comes along and launches a podcast using your business name as their podcast name, there is a potential that people are going to think that podcast is yours or that it's related to you. So from the perspective of, responsible podcasters who are adopting their own or launching their own podcast and coming up with a name, search to make sure that that your use of that name in connection with your podcast isn't going to cause confusion with somebody else's business. Again, it will divert your listeners and potentially lead you to some liability for potentially trademark infringement if you do use a podcast name that's going to cause confusion with somebody else's business. Lastly, file a trademark application. If this podcast is going to be part of your marketing repertoire and it's something that you're going to rely on to bring in customers and clients to your business, it's a business asset. And so make sure that you have firmed up your ownership of that asset with a trademark registration for the name of your podcast. Trademark registrations in Canada and in other countries as well give you the exclusive right to use a name in connection with a particular product or service. And a podcast can be a service. Providing information by a podcast is a service that you provide in exchange for some expected benefit or expected profit, expected goodwill. And so you are fully entitled to trademark the name of your podcast. Here in Canada, you file your trademark application with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. And once it goes through the process, then you are the only one who is entitled to use that name in connection with the podcast in Canada. If you want that right in the United States, you file a United States trademark application. Again, the same deal. Once you get that registration, you are the only one who is entitled to use that name in connection with a podcast in the United States. So trademark registrations are valuable tools, particularly if that podcast is going to form part of your marketing assets. So if you are thinking about launching a podcast and you want some help picking the name, book a free consult with us. We can also help you trademark your podcast name if you are out there with a successful podcast already and you haven't firmed up your ownership of the podcast name. Again, book a free consult with us. We are always happy to help.